I've been dealing with a lot of craziness this week. Here is my definition of craziness. When you present in a very clear, straightforward way facts to someone, and that someone doesn't care, doesn't change their position, doesn't cede anything, that's crazy. I try to stay away from that because it just sucks the living life out of you. If I know somebody is troubled, and you are if you won't accept facts, you're troubled because there's a reason. So you want to live in a false world, or you get too upset, I don't know, the whole bunch of stuff. But if I know somebody is in that category, I'm not going to deal with them. Why would I do that? It's a waste of time. Now, I'm going to give you a few vivid examples of craziness tonight, and I hope it will help your life. And one of those examples is the government shutdown. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. After 43 days, the House voted last night 222 to 209 to open up the government. 6 Democrats crossed over. Swazi, New York, Perez, Washington, Cuellar, Texas, Davis, North Carolina, Golden, Maine, Gray, California. 2 Republicans defected, Massey of Kentucky, and Stubbe of Florida, Gregory Stubbe. Okay, so by capitulating to the Republicans, and what do I mean by that? Well, Democrats' whole thing was, we're not going to open the government until you allow the COVID level spending for Obamacare. And the Republicans said, no, by law, that spending has to come back down because it's crazy anyway, and we have a $38 trillion debt. So you're not going to blackmail us into closing the government to get subsidies you're not entitled to. There was never a chance Republicans would cave to that. Never. And the Democrats knew it. So the government shut down. Here's what I said on News Nation last night. So on the record, I don't care about the complaint. Who cares what they say? On the record is we, the Democratic Party, shut down the United States government for 43 days and got bupkis. That's pretty embarrassing, I think, right? Isn't that embarrassing?
Well, I would. Well,
let me.
Yeah,
can I
ahead,
answer?
Please.
Yes, Bill. It's embarrassing if you're looking at it from the macro. If you're somebody that's just paying attention to the final result.
But what other result is there? So both of my colleagues, Cuomo and Stephen A., were saying, well, now the country's more aware of spending on health care. Okay, millions of people have to suffer for that? Come on. I mean, any government policy that hurts the people has to be re-examined. Okay. Now, the Democrats may have won a small victory last week in the gubernatorial race in New Jersey. It was never in play in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Republicans ran a bad candidate, and it was never even close. But New Jersey was kind of close, according to the polls. And then Mandani wasn't close either in New York City. But the Democrats are saying, well, people were angry, and that's true. Absolutely true. People are angry about high prices, and they were angry about the government shutdown. And when Americans get angry, non-ideological Americans, who's not involved in party politics, they vote against the incumbency. John Adams, start with John Adams. People were teed off about Adams, and they elected Jefferson. Because Adams was a little arrogant and haughty and did some stuff that people go, wait a minute, hold it. It's always that way. So the Democrats might have won that, but again, overall, they were embarrassing. It was absolutely embarrassing. So you've got a situation where the press, the corrupt media, supports the Democrats about 80%. Even they couldn't make this a victory for the Dems. They tried. They couldn't do it. And that's the memo. So to cover that defeat, the Epstein situation arises on the same day. Okay, everybody knows what that is. So let's deflect over to Epstein. Since President Trump was inaugurated in January, the Democratic Party has tried to smear him with Epstein, try to tie Mr. Trump to crimes that Jeffrey Epstein committed. They do it every day, all day. That's what they want to do. There is no evidence that that happened. None. Okay. So Democrats on the House Committee on Oversight leak some emails out to the press, and the press goes nuts. I looked at the emails, nothing there. There's just nothing there. And even worse, there is innuendo that could get people hurt. That was always from the very beginning. That President Trump asked me on St. Patrick's Day at the Oval Office, would you release the files? And I said, yeah, if they're verified. But if they're not verified, if it's rumor or you haven't, Justice Department hasn't nailed it down. Remember, 2 Justice Departments, Merrick Garland and Trump 1, William Barr. Those things have been investigated like crazy. Okay? So I said, if there's evidence that somebody was hanging with Epstein, you got to put it up. But if it's just a rumor, no. People get hurt. Okay. So they throw this stuff out. And again, on News Nation, here's what I said. Go.
If you are asking for unverified information about a heinous crime and criminal to be given to the public, unverified now. Remember, the Justice Department under 2 administrations had this information, not verified it. If that's what you want, then you need to read my book, Killing the Witches, because that's the kind of country
that's not what they want.
We'll have.
No, that is what they want. They want, they being the Trump haters, all of everything the Justice Department has on Jeffrey Epstein. And Cuomo, to his credit, at the end of the segment said, I want everything. Well, I said, well, what if people get hurt? Innocent people. No, we ought to know. How do you know? You can't know. You can't investigate it. I'm right on this. But the bigger picture is that due process is really under fire in this country. Okay. Now, whether you care or not, there is exculpatory evidence in Donald Trump's favor. And it's very powerful evidence. The 3 principals involved with Epstein, who committed suicide, as you know, were Ghislaine Maxwell, Virginia Giuffre, who was molested, and Alan Dershowitz, who was Epstein's lawyer. They are the 3 principal witnesses to what Epstein did. Okay. All 3 said Trump wasn't involved with anything untoward. All 3. Now, that's enough reasonable doubt. That will never get to court in any way, shape, or form. They'll get thrown out in 10 seconds when you have 3 people on the record who had access to Epstein all saying Trump didn't do anything. All right. Now, Dershowitz is the most powerful witness because once Epstein was dead, then attorney-client privilege disappears. Here's what Dershowitz said yesterday.
I was Epstein's lawyer. I was trying to make him the best possible deal I could make. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. And among the questions I asked him, as any lawyer would, is, can you name people who may have had improper sexual relationships with anybody? And if we can turn those people over to the government, we can maybe get you a better deal. And then I went through a variety of names, including Donald Trump. And Jeffrey Epstein said, no, Trump didn't do anything wrong.
All right. So what more do you need? Doesn't matter. The press ran wild last night. Okay? ABC World News Tonight spent 4 minutes 23 seconds on the story. NBC Nightly News, 4 minutes, 34 seconds. CBS TV News, 2 minutes, 7 seconds. Cable, these are estimates on cable because you have a 3-hour prime window, prime time. CNN, 1 hour and 10 minutes out of the 3. MSNBC, a whopping 2 hours, 9 minutes. Fox News spent 5 minutes on it. Okay, so this is just crazy. But it gets worse. So there's a congresswoman from New Mexico named Melanie Stansbury. Roll it.
Secondly, whether or not Virginia Giuffre has accused the president of wrongdoing, what I'd like to say to the American people is believe your eyes. We have all seen the photographs of Donald Trump with underage girls sitting on his lap.
There are no photographs of Donald Trump with girls on his lap. So either Congressman Stansbury is lying or she got faked out by some AI thing or whatever. There are no photographs. Now, the House Ethics Committee should absolutely drag her in and say, what the deuce are you doing? Second, a guy named Rick Stengel, Trump hater. Okay, he used to be a journalist, then he was a Democrat, whatever. Roll him.
I mean, the idea that he calls it a hoax, and all day long people can watch on television them leering at girls at parties and things. It's like, well, gee, it's not a hoax. So I think it has legs, and it should, and it is the sort of thing that could undermine the basis of his presidency.
Again, it's not true. There's no evidence of the president leering at anybody. Now, you would think that the news agencies that put these people on, CNN and MSNBC, would challenge. No, because they don't care what happened. They want to get Trump. Finally, there was a very disturbing X file from Eric Swalwell. You remember that name? He probably the worst Trump hater in the country, represents California. He says, quote, the government was shut down for 40 plus days to protect Donald Trump. People weren't paid. Credit was destroyed. Tenants were evicted. All because pedo protector Mike Johnson sought to shield Donald Trump. But it's coming out now. Pray for these women Trump-Epstein terrorized. Now, if I'm Donald Trump and that goes out on X, I sue Swalwell. But do I win? So herein is the complication of living in the United States of America. Now, Rebecca Rose Woodland, she is a New York attorney, very well thought of, been on this program before. So I come to you, counselor, and I say, Swalwell just said I terrorized underage women. I got a lawsuit?
Of course you do. I mean, look, first we're looking at the President of the United States. So the standard for defamation, which this would be, is actual malice. It's a Supreme Court case against the New York Times, against Sullivan, where when you're a public figure, that which is published has to be proven to have been knowingly said or written in a false way or with reckless disregard for the truth. Both apply here. There's nothing in any of these emails that indicate President Trump terrorized one, two, any women. Nothing at all.
All right, well, let me stop you there. Reckless
Sure.
disregard for the truth would probably have to be the standard, because Swalwell would say, oh, I heard, or I didn't, I wasn't mal. You could prove Swalwell hates Trump. That's easy. He's been hating Trump for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But reckless disregard for the truth. Let's go back to the New Mexico congresswoman who says there's a picture. There isn't a picture. Is that reckless disregard for the truth?
Well, the defense to defamation is absolute truth. So the Mexican congresswoman, the congresswoman from New Mexico would have to show these photos. And what do the photos suggest? If there's a photo of his grandchild sitting on his lap, What's wrong with that? So we're talking about now a situation where she's implying these were sexual photos of underage women. So she would have to show sexually explicit photos of underage women on Donald Trump's lap. This
But
is
she
ridiculous.
can't show
Of
that.
course not, because if that was happening, we would have seen that already
Right. But she
in the
can
last how
say,
many years?
here's what you can say. Oh, I saw it on the social media and it was probably AI, but I didn't know.
Well, no, you have to say something like this against a sitting president or anyone in the public realm. You have to have belief that it is true. If you're just relying on something in social media, that is not enough. That is not enough. This has to be, credentialed information that you sourced, that you know for sure is real. Like I said, an underage woman sitting on Donald Trump's lap, it could be his grandchild.
Now,
But she
so
is
you're saying that
implying
the burden of the case falls on the accuser, but that hasn't been the standard in America. If you're a famous person in the public eye, you don't have those protections.
Well, you have the protection of this New York Times versus Sullivan case, that if there is actual malice, and if Donald Trump can prove, which he may be able to, that the Congresswoman has malice towards him, intentionally stated things in such a way that would create misconceptions. That is intentional disregard for the truth.
Okay.
You cannot spin the
I know what
truth
the
to make
defense
it
would be.
sound bad.
So how about CNN and MSNBC that puts these people on? They know, the networks know what they're going to say because that's always done there. It's called a POV, point of view. They know they're going to come on and rip Trump up. Can you drag them into court in the same case?
Sure, for actual statements, not just overall. They have the right, we have a First Amendment right to have beliefs about the president that don't align with the president. But on specific statements that are knowingly stated incorrectly, false statements, or with
But they didn't
reckless
make them. The
disregard,
guest made them.
well, then the guest can be brought into court.
Okay, but we've established that, Counselor. My question is, can you then drag CNN in a separate lawsuit or MSNBC, sue them as well as the perpetrators of what was said, like on X? That's where Swalwell put this garbage. Can you drag X in?
Well, we can't drag X in because X did not make the statement. They just allow for a forum of interaction the same way they allow other views. If there was evidence, though, that MSNBC or CNN knowingly contributed to these statements, that the host or network brass were encouraging statements like that, if there are emails,
that would be a hard lift.
people,
You're not going to get that.
right.
So they, under the First Amendment,
No.
the CNN and MSNBC would be protected because it wasn't their personnel saying it. Do I have it right?
Yes, I mean, but we did see with, ABC and the situation that happened where one of their hosts stated that President Trump was a rapist.
Yeah,
they
just
paid $16
Stephanopoulos,
million.
right. But he
Yes,
worked for
George
ABC,
Stephanopoulos.
and these people
did,
don't work for, they're just guests. So it was a difference there.
Exactly.
Right.
There's
All
a
right, Counselor, I
difference.
think I have it. If it were me, I would absolutely bring lawsuit in this case. Final thought, we had a guest on Veterans Day who lost his legs in Afghanistan, and the fund.org had helped him. But I mentioned in the process of the interview, I mentioned that the Independence Fund we didn't know what the status was. They are still in business. I think they're in North Carolina, Independence Fund, still there. So if you want to help the fund, the Independence Fund, all of that. And then we have a birthday, Sally Poling, 96 years old. Saw Miller and me at Caesar's Palace, Wildwood, Missouri. Happy birthday, Sally. Enjoy it. Update on podcasts. We got Howie Mandel, November 18th, that'll drop. Piers Morgan today, as I mentioned. Clay and Buck today on all that's on BillO'Reilly.com. Okay, thank you very much for watching and listening to the No Spin News. We have a brand new column on Sunday, and we'll see you again on Monday. We here at the No Spin News keep it simple. Keep it very fact-based, rigorously checking facts. Today, I spent my whole morning doing that, okay? Because we want you to see the picture clearly. What is happening, because what is happening affects you directly and your family and your friends, everybody. That is our mission, and that separates us from the corrupt corporate media, which is in it for the money. We're not in it for the money. We're in it to give you, our loyal viewers and listeners on the radio all across the country, to give you an advantage. You watch us with regulation, you are way ahead of the news cycle. Now, the Talking Points memo this evening is a very disturbing story, the massive taxpayer fraud in Minnesota. All right, so President Trump is blaming the Somali community out there. Close to 90,000 Somalis live in Minnesota, most in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And the reason they live there is because that was a magnet in the beginning when the first Somalis came over. And that's what always happens. Ethnic groups go to where their predecessors are. So the Irish went to Boston and New York. The Italians went to New York. That is the pattern of migration. Mexicans go to California. All right, so Somalis headed on in. Now, the President of the United States, and I talked to him about this directly a few days ago, does not think in general the Somali community really helps this country. Okay, and he's pretty blunt on it. And part of that is their congressperson, Omar, who is a far left, progressive, put any other adjective you want in there, but Trump despises her. And now, with this massive fraud, he is down on the Somali community. So what happened? Okay, so under the Biden administration, trillions of dollars flowed into communities all over the United States during the COVID years. They were unregulated. The money was not watched by feds or state. That's on Biden's watch. Remember, Joe Biden, the 4 years he was in, highest spending president by far in U.S. history, ran up the debt in an astronomical way. So the money pours in to Minnesota, all right? And then three big schemes emerge, all right? Fraud, absolute fraud. Now, if you want to learn about that, you can go and do the Nexus search or the Wikipedia or whatever, Feeding Our Future. I mean, they all got names. But it would be too much for me to explain all this fraud. But they were diverting money. The criminals were diverting money that was supposed to be used to help people into their own pockets in three major ways. Total money, $1 billion. Whoa, 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 whoa. $1 billion. All right, so there have been 87 people charged with crimes, 61 already convicted. These are federal charges. 79 of the 87 Somalis, according to the Hill newspaper, did analysis. So it was a Somali problem. Okay. Now, the government of Minnesota, as you may know, is very liberal. All right. Tim Walz, former vice presidential candidate under Kamala Harris, is the governor. Okay, there he is. There's Tim. Apparently, Tim says he didn't know anything about this, hard to believe, but that's what he says. Democrats control the Senate in Minnesota. The Attorney General is a Democrat. House in Minnesota is Republican. But nobody knew about this for years and years and years and years. It's unbelievable, disturbing. Why? This is what the Wall Street Journal wrote on December 4th. Quote, Democrats won't acknowledge fraud because they want more Americans on the dole. Welfare is central to their political business model. Republicans who make the scandal about immigration are missing the point and missing an opportunity to educate Americans about the entitlement state grift. Okay. I wrote a column yesterday on BillO'Reilly.com. I got into this a bit. But Minnesota is second in means entitlement spending behind Massachusetts. Ready for the stat? $46,000 per welfare recipient in Minnesota. $46,000. The state funnels into entitlements, not Social Security or Medicare or anything like that, giving people stuff. And they're proud of it. Proud of it. It is the second, I don't know what, the second state that spends that much. Minnesota. It's only 6 million people there. They spend more on means entitlement in California. It's just crazy. It really is crazy. Tim Walz, vice presidential candidate. Okay. Now, the population of, as I said, is approaching 90,000 Somalis. I'm adding legal and illegal in there. And if you criticize the Somali community, who is obviously behind, most of them, this fraud, you get branded a racist. Here is the Minnesota Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. Go.
You know, this vile, racist stream of consciousness from President Old Man Yells at Cloud. You're disgusting. And the people of this country deserve so much better. I just watched the video of Donald Trump attacking the beautiful Somali community that calls Minnesota home. They are part of the fabric of our state.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with problem with part of the fabric of your state, madam, but you don't care about $1 billion grift, apparently. You don't care at all, do you? What have you done about it? Nothing. And this would still be going on if not for two reporters. A guy named Ryan Thorpe, another one, Christopher Russo. They both work for the Manhattan Institute, conservative think tank. They broke the story. Not Minnesota law enforcement, not federal law enforcement. Journalists. And that's the memo. Let's get into the point of view of somebody on the ground in St. Paul, which is the capital of the state. Richard Painter is a law professor at the University of Minnesota. And he's a former chief White House ethics lawyer under Bush the Younger. So, Professor, pleased to have you. In my analysis, am I making any mistakes? Am I being unfair?
Well, let's start with who's responsible for the massive fraud in the state of Minnesota. In addition to the criminals, dozens, and it's going to turn out there are probably well over 100 criminals end up going to jail in connection with this fraud. Now, that out of an 80,000 or so Somali community, that's a small percentage. But who's responsible for what happened here? We have an incompetent governor, Tim Walz, and an incompetent Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. They're responsible. They were overseeing these agencies. They're just handing out money, no questions asked, to criminals. And we've had Tim Walz now for 2 terms, and he wants a 3rd term as governor. Peggy Flanagan wants to be our United States Senator. This is a disaster in Minnesota. You also mentioned Massachusetts, which has a lot of social programs, hands out a lot of money, but we haven't heard about anywhere near as much fraud. Yes, there's fraud in Massachusetts, but the government has been a lot more responsible. Until recently, they had Governor Charlie Baker, who was a good governor. We'll see how things work out under the new governor.
Healy's not at that level.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's stay in Minnesota. You say that the Governor Walz is incompetent. So there are 2 questions then that arise. How is he incompetent? Is he just not smart enough? And why do the people of Minnesota keep electing him?
Well, he's smart enough to do what's politically good for him, to get himself reelected, which is to have friends in the state, in various communities, including the Somali community, who have influence. And unfortunately, there have been organized criminals who have abused, taken advantage of influence in the
All
Somali
right, so
community.
you're saying basically he doesn't care about that. He just wants power. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. He wants power,
Right,
and he
and
doesn't care.
He doesn't care
what's going
what
on.
happens. All right. I don't know Mr. Walz. I certainly didn't respect his campaign. I thought he looked like a fool out there. But, you know, I've been to Minnesota many times, and folks don't seem, it's not San Francisco, all right? But they elect the people who don't care, and I agree with that assessment. Why?
Well, it seems to be about partisan politics. Who gets elected? I mean, look at our crime rate; it's sky high.
But why why do the good people of Minnesota keep electing these people that allow crime, fraud, and everything else? Why do they keep casting the ballots for them?
Well, part of the problem is our Republican Party is not competitive anymore in statewide races. The Republican Party is competitive in several congressional districts. Indeed, 4 of our 8 congressional districts have elected Republicans. But in statewide races, they can't find candidates who will appeal to a broader base. Candidates appear to be too much in line with President Trump or too extreme on some social issues where they don't need to be. We used to have some very strong Republicans. Governor Arnie Carlson, a Republican. Governor Tim Pawlenty.
Yeah, I remember Pawlenty. Well, look, like Oregon and other states, Minneapolis, St. Paul dominates. That's where all the people are. But what strikes me about this is that you have a very fervent liberal climate in Minnesota. And I guess that stems back to the Scandinavians coming there. And I guess, I don't know. But when you see terrible crime, as you've seen in Minnesota and, you know, after the George Floyd stuff, and then you see this massive fraud. And rather than deal with the fraud and say, gee, we're sorry, because remember, this tax money is not Minnesota tax money. This is everybody's $1 billion. Everybody. I haven't heard Walz or anybody else say, yeah, really sorry about this. I wish it didn't happen. Have you?
Well, they say they're sorry. They wish it didn't happen, and they're going to make it better. But
I haven't heard they're sorry. They said they're sorry. I haven't heard any apologies.
They're not sorry for their own conduct because they were negligent. They don't want to recognize they were negligent. The government was in charge. And also have to say President Biden, they were just handing out all this money.
Ridiculous.
States.
Right.
And the president of the United States was half asleep. So this was something that I don't think should be blamed on the Somali community. It needs to be blamed on the criminals in the Somali community who took advantage of the Somali community and on the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, the lieutenant governor, Peggy Flanagan, both of them incompetent.
But let me challenge you there. I haven't heard anybody in the Somali community speak out against this. Have you?
Well, the problem is the political leaders who get elected.
I haven't heard anybody, not one person, at 100,000 say, I'm ashamed. And we Somalis aren't like that. I haven't heard anybody do that. And Omar, your congressperson, is outrageous.
Some people, I don't think she speaks for the Somali community. She is an incompetent congressperson. She's also anti-Semitic, and we've all known that. That's been a serious problem with Ilhan Omar, that she should never have been nominated for that seat. Once again, the Republicans are not competitive in that race at all.
Because it's a Somali-dominated district. So
it's a lot of, but others as well. White liberals.
Yeah, but
far left white liberals, and I deal with them all the time at the University of Minnesota. The biggest anti-Semites we have at the University of Minnesota are not Somali at all. They're white leftists.
Interesting.
Running Minneapolis politics for a long time. And then you get the Somali community is being taken advantage of. We've been through this before in this country. We can either fight the mafia or we can blame it on all the Italians. The real answer is to fight the mafia.
Yeah, I understand. Look, I get it. I'm not. I'm a reporter here on President Trump. I understand that all Somalis aren't bad, but I disagree with you a bit. I don't think there's any activism in that community, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that are standing up and saying we need to clean it up. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen it. Somali crime is higher than the other groups, as you know. And until I see it, I'm not going to attack President Trump for his categorization that we were very generous in accepting these people from one of the most horrendous countries on earth. And they came here, and they're not doing what they should do. Anyway, Professor, I want you to have a very Merry Christmas. Say hello to everybody at the university, and it's a pleasure to talk with you. So Christmas coming in, what do we got now? 17 days? Yeah, 17 days. I got my lists. You know, I'm so happy that I am a disciplined person because I forgot somebody. And when I was writing a list out, I looked at it, I said, who am I missing here? Popped in. So I don't want to miss anybody on Christmas, right? So I got the Christmas gift list. There it is. Then I have the social events list, where I have to be, what I have to do, time frame. That's the second list. Third list, the purchases I have to make beyond gifts. Food, snacks, beverages. Got that list. In fact, after this broadcast, I'm going out and get some of that stuff. And then finally, I have the nap list. What days I have to take a nap. Got to schedule that nap in. Winston Churchill, every day, took a nap, 20 minutes. I think he was gassed because he drank all day, and that's why he had to take the nap, but I could be wrong on that. Winston Churchill. Okay, so make your Christmas season much more fun by being organized. Thank you for watching and listening to the No Spin News. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We'll see you again tomorrow.